Episode 287, Seaweed and Ancient Grain. This is The Change Underground. I'm your host, John Moore. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. An interesting paper has been produced by Meat and Livestock Australia entitled Asparagopsis Feedlot Feeding Trial. Now, if we put aside the feedlot portion of the trial, the seaweed effect is quite remarkable. Asparagopsis is a red seaweed, and the results are reasonably spectacular. Quote, the amount of Asparagopsis required to eliminate methane was surprisingly low. Supplementing feed with 0.05%, 0.10% and 0.20% Asparagopsis reduced methane production by respectively 9%, 38% and 98%, end quote. Let me put that another way. If each kilogram of feed is formulated to the 0.2% figure, it's a whopping 2 grams per kilo, or about 3 kilograms per beast per 100 days. Now, clearly for the worldwide beef industry, huge amounts are going to be needed. But here's the good news. We can grow the stuff in the ocean and sequester carbon as we do so. The Southern Ocean Carbon Company is doing that as we speak off the south coast of Tassie. There are always caveats with these newer technologies. From the MLA, the Meat and Livestock Australia post, quote, the bioactive from Asparagopsis, bromoform, can be unsafe if consumed in high amounts, but there was no trace detectable in the meat, kidneys or fat tissues of the steers, end quote. This is indeed good news, but we need to be aware of the human propensity to misunderstand figures. If 0.2% is good, then 0.4 must be doubly as good, although how doubling can reduce the methane production by 196% is a concept I don't have a handle on. Yet there is that human tendency. Getting this into a grass-fed model is a step further. On smaller herds and in dairy where supplemental feeds are regularly provided, then it's a straightforward process. We just require the studies to confirm the efficacy of seaweed supplements in non-feedlot cattle. As an anecdote, I've fed seaweed meal free choice to goats, sheep and potty calves. Now, the calves had access from the moment we acquired them when they were about 4 days old. The sheep and goats some years after they'd arrived on our place, and their reactions are instructive. The calves just nibbled at the meal from time to time. The sheep and goats copped a whiff of the stuff and nearly knocked me over to get at it. They obviously needed whatever was in it. Iodine is deficiency in Australian soils, but is common in seaweed, so maybe it was that. There could be benefits other than reduced methane emissions too. The MLA paper pointed out one such in daily growth rate. Quote, there was no change in feed intake across the different levels of Asparagopsis inclusions into the feed. However, at the inclusion levels of 0.10% and 0.20%, there was an indication of weight gain improvement of 53 and 42% respectively. Given the small sample size of animals, this needs to be confirmed with further work, end quote. It is, though, very promising research. So you feed these animals a little bit of this seaweed, they stop burping and they grow more quickly. Win-win-win. Another area of research I stumbled upon this week relates to the harvest of native grains. That means native Australian grains, of course. Little known outside the Indigenous and archaeological communities, Australia is the location of the first bread makers on Earth. This bread was made by grinding native millet, mixing it with water and baking it on hot stones. The book Dark Emu, available on Audible, for which I received no funds but will recommend because this book is great, goes into greater detail on early grindstones and evidence of bread making at least 36,000 years ago. Quote, that puts Australian baking way behind anything that's happened anywhere else in the world, says author Bruce Pascoe. He's talking about 36,000-year-old grindstones discovered in New South Wales, used by Aboriginal Australians to turn seeds into flours for baking. Well ahead of any other civilization that started baking early on, like the Egyptians, who began baking bread around 17,000 BC, end quote. So that's 17,000 BC would make it 19,000 years before present. Now, a program running since 2020 around the town of Narrabri in western New South Wales is collecting these ancient grains and other grass seeds in an effort to develop both a new market for these and deeper regenerative farming techniques. The program, as these things should be, is being run by the local Indigenous people. There's such a wealth of knowledge despite what has been classified as genocidal attempts to destroy First Nations people and culture held within these First Nations survivors. It's criminal to waste. And we need to listen to and include these nations in the future of regenerative and climate mitigation actions. A culture, or rather a series of interlocking cultures, with the knowledge of at least 40,000 years on the continent, and probably closer to 60,000, is a resource we'd be foolish to ignore. To do so would be the definition of hubris. And it's not just a research program. From the ABC piece entitled Native Grains Harvest Brings Together Culture, Food and Regenerative Farming, quote, Black Duck Foods has joined forces with the Plant Institute to find markets for traditional food, growing processes that care for country and could possibly return economic benefits to Indigenous people. General Manager Chris Andrews said it was important the process was led by First Nations people. What we want to create is a space that is Aboriginal-led, an Aboriginal space that whitefellas get invited into, not the other way around, which seems to be the norm in most cases, he said, end quote. And the other thing with many of these grains is that they are perennial. This has many advantages, again from the piece. It's about, quote, it's about putting a long-lived native perennial grass to store carbon, improve biodiversity, to crop, to provide feed for grazing. So there's multiple benefits, end quote. This doesn't mean the end of wheat production, but it could in the long term, as there are efforts underway to produce a perennial wheat too, as explained in a piece from the Land Institute, which provides these answers to the questions, why perennial wheat? Quote, elite lines of perennial wheat currently yield about 50 to 70% of annual wheat cultivars, and we continue to make improvements. Some of our perennial wheat plants in Kansas have lived for 9 years or more, 6 years in other locations. 20 of the most promising crosses have been grown in 9 different countries to see how particular genetic types vary in performance when grown, end quote. Now, millet won't provide the same bread as those used to slice white supermarket bread, but it could provide a good starting point for a really good sourdough mixed grain loaf. And the benefits of perennial grains are many. Way more root development, way less fuel burnt, no annual planting, and soil erosion benefits to boot. It's perhaps time for an episode on the possible ways of building a fully perennial garden, small farm system, so keep your eye out for that. Now, given the doom and gloom of the past few years, from climate issues to the public health issues, on top of all the stuff life throws at us anyway, it's a bit of a tonic to bring these 2 good news stories to you, my listeners. A way around the ruminant methane issue that doesn't involve lab meats, and a complementary grain production system that could be revolutionary when it comes to regen food production. A couple of big wins. Okay, so if you've liked what you've heard here and feel like supporting the podcast, I have a Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes and at the website. And trust me, all coffees are gratefully accepted. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. Thank you all for listening, and I'll be back next week.